Well, here we are once more. Welcome. Oh, lovely. Where's my music gone? I swear I've forgotten how this entire program works in the time that I have been away. Because yes, I took a week off last week because I wanted to. I had a very busy week at work, and I just didn't want to do anything, talk to anyone. Especially not you people that should be sharing the stream as we speak. Let's just turn that down a touch. I hope you all have had a great Easter. I hope you're back into the swing of things. I had to hit the ground running, and it was as if the Easter holiday never bloody happened. But hey, we're not here to listen to me moan and whine and complain. We're here to talk about boobs. I mean, elves. Yes, elves. Modwife is patrolling the chats. Hello, Modwife.
Hi.
Hello. So behave yourselves. Hello, Jeffram. Hello indeed. We got Ultra. Hello, Ultra. Stug. Feanor did nothing wrong. Debatable. That's probably the entire premise of the books, that Feanor did something wrong. Who else have we got? We've got the wife, obviously. I think I saw someone else in there, but the message is now gone. People can filter in as they need to do. I realise that things might be a bit slow on the uptake. Oh, look, it's a Welshman. Hello, Dean.
Hiya, Jack.
How you doing, mate?
Not bad. You've got a lovely library here. I must say, the smell of parchment and books, fantastic. Love it.
Yes. It's parchment and books and nothing else.
No.
No dried blood.
No.
Trouble Cat's in the chat. Hello, Trouble Cat. But no, we were trying to get you on for a little while.
We have, yes.
Yeah, but you sort of nearly crossed over to the other side, sir. But it's good to see that you have survived your trials and you are back with us, indeed. So, yes, good. You're back.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're back. Who else have I got here? I'm just gonna pick one at random. I'm not even gonna look. This one. Oh, it's him.
Oh no! Hi.
Hello, Variax. How you doing?
Very nice, thank you. Very well. How are you?
Well, I'm alive.
Mm-hmm.
More than I can say for Dean. And you as well.
Also alive. Yeah.
Yes.
Again, lovely library. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Where are the picture books? I need to find them.
The picture books are the ones with all the the circles with the upside down stars and sort of that red painty ink type.
I'll go and find them. That's my kind of.
Don't go reading those. At least not in the original Latin. Let's have a gander. Who else have we got? Well, speaking of wizards, look what I found.
Hey, wait, you let everyone else hang out in the library? You make me call in from the coffee house. That's not fair.
Just teleport here. You're a wizard.
I'll do that in a bit.
Someone go and sabotage the teleport circle. How you been, Marinus?
I've been pretty good.
Good.
I'm looking forward to discussing elves. Elves are fun. I like
Yes,
elves.
they are my favorite fantasy race. Which I find dwarves get a lot more love nowadays. Elves are sort of I think Orlando Bloom's Legolas kind of made them too cool for school. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of seen as bougie to like elves.
The dwarves have windrows now, and that's the metal dwarf sounds are awesome.
Yeah, I know them. There was a. What you need to do is go and listen to Calamvi De Profundis. I don't know if you guys have ever heard their music, where they're doing sort of like Tolkienian music, and they take Tolkien's lyrics, they put it to song. It's very good. But even they do mostly dwarf stuff now. Who else have I got? I've got this guy. Hello, Kevin.
Hey guys.
How we diddling?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice to see you all.
Well, that was good to see you as well, mate. You're from the other pond, the other side of the pond. I won't count the
Yes. Yep.
and
On the other
it's nice
hemisphere,
to finally be outnumbering people from that side of the world. Look, we need to get on to the next guest and actually start the content, because people don't like intros. I don't like intros. Oh, look, it's Realm Builder. Hi, Realm Builder.
Howdy, howdy.
How have you been since our last interaction?
Far too busy, but good. How are you?
Far too busy, but good. Right, I have the Council of Nerds has assembled, and as we start talking about elves, there it is. She is in the room. It is the Elven Maid in. Welcome, Emmy. Welcome indeed. You don't need to interact too much, my dear. You just listen along. However, ladies and gents, if you wouldn't mind taking the link up there, that one, and sending it to a big chat room or one friend, or just sharing it on your social media, that'd be fantastic. Oh. Okay. Well, straight away, we have got a Rumble rant. So someone has given me some money to ask a question about elves. It is Jeff from Denkar, and for $2 dues, he asks, "Hey, first elf question. What is your preferred height for elves in your fantasy games? Taller than humans, the same height, or shorter?" There's no agreement on this topic. And you know what? We'll start sort of from the top left there, and we'll go along. So, Variax, you're up first.
Hi. Yeah. So traditionally, I think they should be taller. I come from a very kind of background of Warhammer and Elder Scrolls. So, in that's what they are. Though I am aware that there are also little people who live at the bottom of your garden, and they drop pots in Golden Axe as well. So, so they can be short as well. But I prefer when I think of an elf, I think they're taller than humans. Is
Sort
my
of
answer.
Tolkien style elf.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Dean?
Right, well, I grew up on Lord of the Rings from a young age. Loved the trilogy. So when I started playing D&D, I naturally assumed elves would fall. And it was one day looking at the second edition AD&D Player's Handbook, I realized elves in AD&D were about 5 foot tall. And I was a bit taken back. So I don't like short elves. And in my mind, and when I run a game, I let players know if they play an elf, they're more Tolkienian than short and garden.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm not 100% dogmatic across the board. I mean, because there's so many different kinds of elves. But in general, my first introduction, I think even before Tolkien, was this guy right here on the cover of Keep on the Borderlands.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, when I saw that as a kid, that was just like the ultimate elf badass. And because before that, I thought they were, Christmas elves or
real elves wear skull caps.
Yes, and are just like throttle a dude like full on in the chest without blinking an eye. So I do like Tolkien elves, but the D&D elves, especially the ones that seem to be kind of based on like the Paul Anderson stories, where they were in general, a little more frail, a little bit shorter, not small, just a little bit, to have that kind of differentiation between the humans and them in their stature. Always been my preference.
Well, Marinus there is trying to, be gold star here. Let me. There you go. Go for it, Marinus.
Yes. So this is the AD&D thing, and all AD&D is the bestest D&D. So there's the image from the Bible of D&D.
Okay. And what do you prefer? Do you agree with this?
I would say that I like this unless I'm playing Shadowrun. And then we have Australian elves that are tall, and other things like that. Also, are the Dark Sun elves? Are those a little bit taller and they're leaner and creepy looking? That's kind of cool.
They're like 6.5 feet tall, I think, in Dark Sun.
Yeah, it really just depends on setting for me, to be completely honest. But I have to plug the AD&D.
Can I say the half orc in that artwork always makes me quite giggle. Listen here, she.
Yeah,
He's having a good time.
he is.
He's
enjoying himself.
Be included. Right. Well, it's me. I'm next, but I'm the host, so I'll let the Realm Builder guy get first crack.
I would say it's a little bit setting dependent or world dependent, but my preference is the Germanic mythological depiction of elves upon which Tolkien's depiction of elves is based, which is that they are roughly human height. I do like the broken sword depiction, where it varies depending on where they're from, which is kind of the approach I tend to use in my gaming. But I also grew up playing MERP, and that was tall elves, taller than human. The elves were there, or are there. So it's kind of a sliding scale. High elves I tend to have about human height, and then it kind of goes down from there. Especially if I am running in Greyhawk, where you have the truly kind of barbaric Grugak elves, which are, in my estimation, stockier and shorter than your standard elf. So, but my preference would be the taller variety.
A character springs to mind whom I bring up far too often, and everyone that knows my content knows exactly what I'm about to say, and that's Drizdo Erden, who is very short. If you read the books and you look at the artwork, you think he's this tall, imposing, sort of manly figure, but actually I think he's like 5'3", 5'4", something like that in terms of measurement. So he's a bit of a short ass. I like to have my elves be a bit more Tolkien, a bit more grace and fair. But the elves I write about most often are not my high elves, but my wood elves, and they tend to vary in height, skin color, and all the rest of it based on the type of tree that they are most associated with. So you might find a silvery skinned wood elf that is more associated with a birch tree. One of the main characters that I write about is a girl called Hiara, who is a sort of shorter, dark skinned oak wood elf. So I like having a bit of variety in my elf heights. But if it's just traditional fantasy, I think I'm going to have to go with the majority of the panels ruling. Tall elves, best elves. Sorry, shorties. Look, everyone's just like, yes. They're nodding along.
I'm used to being the only one right in the room. It's fine. I can be the only one right. It's all good.
Well, I think the reason for short elves in AD&D was to make humans stand out a bit more. Because it was like, the elf is just a better human in like Tolkien fantasy. So what is special about the humans in AD&D mechanically? Well, they're stronger and sturdier than an elf. That's kind of what my line of thinking is when it comes to how Gygax was maybe thinking about elves, because I think they were an afterthought. He wanted it to be a very human-centric game. He was more of a Conan kind of guy, whereas the rest of his community was very Tolkien. I think there was sort of a middle ground reached as to what races were actually included. Am I right about that, or am I making that up? Anyone know?
The demi-humans were supposed to be more of on the side, with the humans being the center of the story, which matches the Appendix N experience. So like humans are always like the main thing. Like, I mean, the broken sword, it's about a human. And then everyone else kind of is around them. So if you're playing a supporting character, then a demi-human's totally okay.
But you don't really get a main character in AD&D though, do you? You have a party of characters. So I see your point, and I think you're probably right. But when it comes to a main character in the party, it kind of depends on where you are in the game. Like, for example, right now we're in the Brass Dragons campaign. We are in a swamp, and one of the characters is from that swamp. So the things that are happening are more closely related to that character. So the main character is kind of a revolving who's got the main character hat on at the moment sort of thing, dependent on location or characters that we're interacting with. So it's not really like you've got a main character per se.
The main character is whatever character I'm playing. That's how this works.
I see. So it's an ego thing.
And Gary seemed to draw more inspiration from the stories that did have a single main character rather than an ensemble like Lord of the Rings. And he clearly liked the types of settings where elves were part of like the magical people that were kind of dying out and they were being replaced by humans.
Now, that is a bit of a trope, but it is a trope that I sort of lean into. in terms of my elvish experience. Variac, we were just talking about Oblivion before things kicked off.
Yeah.
And what's dotted around Cyrodiil, which are probably the most interesting dungeons to explore?
Oh, the Aeliad ruins.
The Aeliad ruins. So
yes,
you've got
the ruins of an ancient empire that indeed was elven.
And very racist.
Yeah.
As they should be.
As they should be, yes. You see, fantasy. You see, I've got I write about a good healthy dose of fantasy racism in my world, but my elves are actually not racist. At least the highborn. They are the shepherds of everybody else, apart from the dwarves. But because they live for so long, like one of the main characters that you meet pretty much on the first page of what I've written is Lord Aravas, and he is the advisor to King Folno, who's on his deathbed. But before that, he was the advisor to Folno's father, and before that, he was the advisor to Folno's father's father, and so on and so forth for a couple generations. So when you've got these beings that are living as long as they do, it kind of seems like a waste just to have them be set dressing and not try and shepherd a bit. Like, yes, they don't get massively involved, but they will push things in the right direction, sort of like a Gandalf figure. That makes sense to you guys?
Yeah. When you live so long, you'll get a lot of wisdom, and that's they'll need to impart that.
I think it would lead one of two ways. Either you become the shepherd because you care for the people, or if generation after generation they refuse to listen to your advice because you know what's best for them, you then become more reclusive and pull yourself away from general society.
I've got a sect of them too. They're called the Pale Elves, and they are the ones that sort of the Civil War was shepherds versus dominators. Do we look down upon the lesser lived folk, or do we help them? And it didn't end well for anyone. Sort of rewrote everything. But
that lifespan can also work against them with regard to wisdom too. It's almost like when you've got all the time in the world, there's no rush to acquire knowledge or wisdom because there's always tomorrow or next century. Think about human beings. It's like, okay, you got to study for a test that you're going to take in 6 months versus if you're going to take the test in 2 days. Obviously, if you've got all that extra time, it can be a great temptation to just put it off, and so stretch that across centuries or even millennia. I could just see it going. I could totally see the ones that have accumulated all this knowledge and wisdom and perspective over hundreds of years, and then the ones that are just almost stuck, and maybe even never achieving that because they always think they've got just endless time.
Or they could set a date to go and see their friends 80 years down the line, not realizing those friends will be dead. Fririan. That is the time lapse, wasn't it? 80 years. We'll meet back here. 80 years time. She goes back, and they're all old or dead. I'm sure someone in the chat will tell me. That's the elf anime that came out recently. The Adventure of Fririan and Friends. Hey, realm builder guy. You're a realm builder. What do you think? Elves. What should they be? What's their role? What should they be doing?
Well, it really depends. I mean, there are a few depictions if we're looking at it from a tabletop role-playing game perspective that kind of stand out away from the usual tropes. One are the elves as depicted in Glorantha and RuneQuest, which are utterly alien. I mean, they actually look like trees. And they basically despise humanity for tainting the world in a way. And then the depiction of elves in Dolmenwood, where they're kind of the antagonistic race. You can't play one. They're always kind of around and kind of shimmering in and out, kind of like an elven court, and they'd really like to get their land back. And that's something I like because that is from 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, The elves are evil. I mean, they're the baddies, and that's why in a lot of old like AD&D stuff, elves were always chaotic. In Greyhawk, elves are chaotic. They could be chaotic good, but they're chaotic. They come from chaos, and I think that's where Gygax is directly pulling from Paul Anderson,
and why they don't have souls in AD&D.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he wrote
souls.
extensively about that.
What was that game? Came out many years ago now. It was remade recently. You're dead at the start, and they bring you back. Like this gnome brings you back in a big machine.
It's Kingdoms of Alamar.
Yes, and you've got like the War of the Unseelie and Seelie in that, haven't you? I didn't play too much of it. It was just sort of springing back to mind. Anyone else play that?
No.
A
little bit. It got quite repetitive.
Well, most games from that era do.
I mean, the lifespan of elves is a general problem that is hard to reconcile in a gaming sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, well, we've got time type of thing, and the fact that a lot of people don't understand it was most evidently portrayed in that trash of a show called Rings of Power.
What's that?
Where they completely forgot that Galadriel is actually the oldest living.
Yeah, I refuse to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
no,
but it showed this lack of understanding of how age works when you're essentially immortal. I do like that in Dungeons and Dragons, they're not immortal; they just live really long.
Yeah.
But I'd still like that a little bit more condensed because it's such an alien thing, and I think that's one of the things people forget, especially in a lot of modern gaming, is they're an alien species to humanity. They're utterly different. It's not just cosplay humans with pointy ears.
You know what series did that really well? The Elder Scrolls. Like I was just trying to make my my high elf lady in the black hair, red eyes. I sometimes post her online as clickbait. I was trying to make her as like, can you make a good looking elf girl in that game? No, because the elves are just weird looking in the Elder Scrolls. I mean, Morrowind is a great way of experiencing an alien elf culture, and I think Beriax can probably attest to that better than I. He would be my Elder Scrolls expert on this.
I've played it a bit. Yeah. It's Oblivion and Morrowind. Yeah, you're dumped into this land that's ruled by the Dunmer, where you've got to get your head around things like slavery is okay, it's legal and that kind of stuff, and the land is choked in ash, so they all speak very gravelly, as I'm about to do because I've got a bit of a cold. But yeah, it does a very good way of introducing you to a realm that is not in. It's got human pockets, and some of it is very familiar, but some of it is quite alien. And exploring these different facets of their world is.
You've got the egg mines and the mushroom towers.
Yeah, and nothing's. It's not really explained, like laid out or anything. You just got to like piece things together yourself about why everything is and how the economy works and things like that, and the different religious cults that are about and things like that.
That's another thing that is interesting on the Dunmer is the relationship they have to the Daedra. Kevin, you gotta go. Plug yourself and then flee.
Yep. Thank you. Kevin Lamb 74 on X. Anybody who's going to DaveCon this weekend, hope to run into you. Have a great one, guys.
Judy boy, mate.
Yeah.
Later.
Bye.
I will pop his X in the chat down there. Yes, he I believe he did warn me that might happen, but it is okay. Before we have a Rumble rant again for another $2 dues, keeping the lights on. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. What are the panel's thoughts on how Dungeons and Dragons historically handled elves in game, with books like the 2nd edition Book of Elves and 3.5 Book of the Drow, personal favorite, versus WotC's more recent damages? I can't speak to those two books specifically, but I can give broad opinions. But I'll again, I will allow the panel to have a crack at it first. Variax, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not a D&D expert by any means. The most I've played of D&D is Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and 3. So all I could really compare is really like how elves are in 1 and 2 compared to 3, and I think that'll more be along the lines of the rule set changes and how things open up for everyone. So yeah, but I'm struggling on this one really because it's a D&D thing.
Yes, well,
Um,
there's a massive D&D core to this
Yes.
audience, but we can discuss more generic Elvish stuff in a mo. How about you, Dean?
It's quite interesting because back in my 2E days, so this is sort of late 80s, early 90s, I had quite a fascination with the drow, and I remember having rules around a player being able to play a drow. Dritz had just come out. It was fantastic. Everybody wanted to play a drow. And I always remember that they had this, because it's such a powerful race, you had magic resistance right from the start. It was something like 50% and just went up from that every level. You were penalized on your XP growth. 20% of your XP just vanished, gone. So you were even slower progressing. If you multi-classed on top, boy, you know, your wizard would be like 5th level in the party before you're reaching 2nd level. Not quite that extreme, but it was that kind of penalty. I then also remember in 3.5, the Book of Drow came out, and that made Drow a very balanced playable race. I don't think they had any level advancements or anything like that. And I was a bit sad because they'd taken away some of the uniqueness of what the Drow represented. You know, their ability to resist magic, their ability to, because of the Underdark, their innate ability to conjure darkness and to levitate, to cause fairy fire and stuff like this. A lot of that was being stripped away. Recent changes Wizards of the Coast have made, the only thing I can comment on there is that they moved from races to species for some reason. I think that's more semantic. But more, they took the uniqueness of every race away. You didn't have attribute increases. You could just choose whichever attribute you wanted. So every race became quite vanilla. And it made me really sad. Yeah. So yeah, that's my views on this. Love the old Drow. 3.5 watered it down. I think now races or species are meaningless in D&D.
You're not wrong, especially with 5th edition's Tasha's rules, where you can just sort of swap around where the score is, which I've used once or twice for races that don't really have anything going in terms of a story reason as to why they would be the way they are. I remember I changed an Aasimar away from being charismatic to strength, because it made more sense to me that he'd be superhuman rather than, a bard. But yeah, the Drow are one of those things that are now just you slap a bit of not even blackface on, because they've changed them from being ashen skinned to light blue and or purpley tinged. Meredith.
So with me, I wanted to read the entire Book of Elves before this, but I didn't have a chance because things happened, and then I got distracted by other things.
Way.
But with AD&D, one of the kind of cooler things that happens with elves is buried in the rules that nobody ever uses, is you age by casting certain spells. Like Wish takes off multiple years. So what you end up having is the elves being able to just cast those spells just however they want. And then they have the level cap to kind of balance that. So from a game balance perspective, that's kind of how they did it. As far as, hey, look, this is supremely cool and magical. And then diving into the Drow, which everybody loves to discuss, in the original 1st edition Monsters Manual, it just says these are mythical and they're as dark as the fairies are light. And is kind of like this massive mystery. And then when you step into 2E, you go a little bit more into it, and that's where you have the drow described with all the extra powers and stuff. And then Drist being super edgy and cool really made everybody really want to play the drow. And I think that whole familiarity breeds contempt is kind of what's going on too. Is you take something that's really, really special and you make it not as special. And it just ends up as the sludge with the modern editions. And I'm probably weird in that I've never played 5th edition at all.
That is strange.
So yeah, I mean, people say I have because I played Baldur's Gate 3 for 1 hour, but I don't really consider that 5th edition. So the closest I've come is Shadow Dark. So yeah, I do think that the elves having the different flavors of elf was cool. Like the gray elves that were more reclusive and smarter. They're all wizardy and they ride hippogriffs. Then you had the aquatic elves that no one ever really talks about. And they don't get magic in 1E. They just don't. They're stronger, but they don't have magic. And then you have the more flavored generic elves. Then the wood elves are a little bit more dumb and a little bit stronger. And then there's still trickles of all of this down through fiction. Like trying to remember, like Spellmonger books does some interesting things with elves. Them being a completely alien race separate from humans. And their magic works totally different. But it also ties to the sci-fi stuff, that the blending the sci-fi and fantasy, since humans originally were setting up a space colony style thing, and the elves ruined it and made them regress into medieval period, which is kind of fun. So space elves is what you get with them. So those are kind of the big things. I don't think I addressed what the super chat really wanted to know, and that kind of comes down to, I haven't read the Book of Elves in like 20 years, guys. So the only thing I remember from it is that you had the origin story of the elves spreading out to all the different realms and going from the various fairy realms into these material realms due to some kind of cataclysmic event. And I was planning on using that in a game myself soon. So that's the only thing I kind of remember from there.
How about you, Realm Builder guy? Take a stab.
Having just grabbed it just off the shelf right here, because all my AD&D 1st and 2nd edition books
show off
are possibly close. I like the handling. I mean, the complete Book of Elves has some broken kits in there. I think everybody knows that. For like in a game that's not about game balance, it definitely messes it up a lot. However, I like the fact that there was individual flavor in there. Same with 1E. You really felt that if you dive into Greyhawk, where Gygax kind of talks about the different types and styles of elves. Drow in the older editions, like was just said, they were alluded to as maybe they exist, maybe they don't. And then, of course, you get Vault of the Drow, and you get the Giant series, and they're there. They're actually one of my absolute favorite villain races because they are
you can do a lot
evil.
with them.
They attack from underground. You know,
my favorite thing to do is drop darkness in several locations because they have that innate ability, and then just have them body the party while the party's going, what the hell? I can't. Dark vision doesn't work in that, does it, guys?
Yeah, and as far as the Book of the Drow, I never read it. I never had it. I played a lot of 3.5, but only used the 3 core books, so never got any of the splat books there. So I can't speak to that. As far as recent changes, I agree that Tasha's Cauldron of Crap definitely ruined 5th edition. Like it dramatically shifted the tone of the game and the design intent, moving it, in my estimation, away from even remotely being Dungeons and Dragons anymore. And now, like, it's the meme. It's just cosplaying humans, but it's true because
years onto them.
None of it really matters anymore. Do whatever you want. And
now that sometimes in some settings and some tables, fine. But there's also a lot of times where if you want the sort of the crunchy RPG-ness of something, it's not going to fly.
But then why have elves at all?
Jack, there are plenty of wrong people. Yeah, there are wrong people everywhere. That's fine.
Well,
They can be
I'll
wrong.
put it this way: why have elves at all? Because it's nice to have sort of the aesthetics sometimes. Now, this is not me saying that it is the best way to play or even the right way to play. This is me saying, to put it in Elder Scrolls terms, this is me saying that an elf in Skyrim may as well be an Imperial in Skyrim. In Oblivion, there's a bit more differentiation. In Morrowind, there's a hell of a lot more differentiation. In Daggerfall, there's even more differentiation in between the elves. So, you know, the more you turn your brain off, the more Skyrim smooth brain you get. And sometimes that's all you want to do, is just say, bugger it.
It was interesting listening to your replies, because obviously I struggled on this one because I didn't understand the question. But yeah, with me playing like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 be like more or less my own experience in Dungeons and Dragons. It kind of mirrored what you guys said, because yeah, in Baldur's Gate 1, in Baldur's Gate 2, there's a dark elf called a drow called Viconia, and she's got like high magic resistance. And
sorry, what?
Yep. And you know, if you play an elf in Baldur's Gate 2, because it's second edition, you know, there you can get like extra dexterity, and you can be certain classes but not others, and there's restrictions. Whereas you go into Baldur's Gate 3, and like I say, everything's very watered down, and mechanically, like I don't know really what massive difference it makes being a drow compared to being a human. It matters role-playing wise, because certain people will react to you differently. Like you can meet some goblins, and if you're a drow, they'll worship you, whereas if you're a human, they'll try and attack you, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But mechanically, everybody can do everything, so it doesn't matter so much. You know, I didn't really see much of a difference when I played it through as other things. So yeah, there's definitely like a watering down going on, like as you go through the editions, as far as I can tell, especially compared. You know,
The end sloppening.
yes, yeah. So
it
was interesting that aligned, even though I've got a very limited view of it.
It's interesting that you sort of use that terminology, that it aligns even though you have a limited view. So something I was working on before life happened was I was working on a video script, and it was entitled The Devolution of Fantasy, or Dungeons and Devolutions, the Regression of Fantasy, I think is what I termed it. And it's very much that as the hobby or as the genre goes on and continues into the future, we have this sort of coat of paint that we keep applying. And you go back to Gygax's era, or Moorcock's era, or even Tolkien's era. You've got the original works, and then you have a derivative work, and then you have another derivative work, and each time you have a derivation, you've got the modern sentiment of that time period put on top of it. So the 90s was a lot grittier, the 2000s was just kind of there, and now you've got the way the orcs look in the new edition of the game, where they are the mental illness haircut, buff lady that with little tusks and just like little pointy ears stapled to her. So it's it's not just elves. It's every aspect of the genre, I think, becomes more ubiquitous to itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used this analogy before, and I do apologize because it's kind of disgusting. It's like creators in the genre are drinking their own piss. And it's just an ever-ending cycle, and it gets worse each time. Apparently, we have another.
Sorry.
We do. No, say your point.
Well, it's just like dwarves get maybe a little taller and a bit little slimmer.
Yeah,
and
they don't. The women don't have beards.
Mm-hmm.
My dwarves,
Ridiculous.
my lady dwarves don't have beards. They have little downs. Sort of my facial hair, not really facial hair. We have another one. Let's have a go here. Shitty chat. Where was it? Thank you for the Rumble Rant Ultra. Your thoughts about the Sea Elves from Dragonlance? I've not run into them yet, and no spoilers because I still haven't got around to starting Dragons of Spring Dawning. Even I got the book, and I keep looking at it going, I will get to this, and I still haven't. So if we can avoid spoilers, all the better.
It's a shame that Kevin isn't here anymore, because he's a
Dragonlance man. Yeah.
buff. I personally, like, Dragonlance really got me into a lot of this, but I haven't read the Dragonlance books in, what year is it now? 2025. So going on 30 years.
What year is it?
Yeah. So honestly, I don't have any qualified thoughts right now.
That's fair. That's very fair.
They're a very natural outgrowth of the first edition Monstrous Manual ones, right? So like when you encounter the sea elves in first edition, there's a high chance that they're going to have friendly dolphins with them. And the main thing with the Dragonlance ones is they shapeshift into dolphins and porpoises.
So that's kind
I
of cool.
think
They're
those are
like
the two
elf
things that
sea
they-
druids. I like that.
Yeah.
My first elf druid was actually a wild elf from back in 3.5. His name was Ethlendil, and I really enjoyed playing him. Although the animal shape forms have always been like the least appealing part of druids to me. I don't know about you guys. I've always preferred the spell casting component. I didn't really do the whole wild shape thing. Am I wrong? You guys?
I find the limited nature of a druid's wild shape is actually works against the enjoyment of playing that kind of a druid. I'm one of those people that if I was playing a druid, and I played one back in second edition, which I absolutely loved, whilst I was still a player, became a forever DM after that.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, I loved the shape change nature, but it was fixed: one reptile, one bird, one mammal. You got to roll a d6 and recover that times 10% of your hit points, which was great. But it was too limited for you to really enjoy the class in a meaningful way.
The problem in 5th edition is it's too bloody powerful. It's basically a second health bar, which you can just bring up whenever you want.
Oh, the temporary
speaking
hit
of
points,
elves,
yeah.
It's Feifel. Feifel has arrived. Everyone say hello to Feifel. It's the second elf.
Hello.
Hello.
If you've not, you wouldn't have seen Feifel's artwork, would you, Verax? You don't really use the Twitter machine all that much. I'll have to send you some.
I did use it when it was Twitter. Yeah.
It's Twitter, but it's just weirdly branded now. And yes, Elven supremacy. I don't think we have anyone here that would deny Elven supremacy. Yeah, see, no denials.
Not in this audience. Dwarves all the way around.
Here's someone who might have something to say because he has a glorious beard. It is a famous YouTuber, DM Wisdom.
I'm famous?
You're more famouser than most of us.
Oh, whatever. That doesn't mean nothing. Tomorrow, you guys are all going to be 1 billion subscribers on every single platform known to man, and here I am still playing with dolls. So, yeah.
So, we've just come off the old elf supremacy question. Be ye an elf supremacist?
So, I came in really late? What do you mean by that?
So, we're talking about elves. It's just the general theme is elves.
Yeah.
So far, yeah, I like elves. If Graph Paper was here, he'd be on the dwarf rant and saying that the pointy ears don't know what... Yeah, there you go. There's the brass dragon who didn't want to be on the panel today because he's scared of the elven supremacy. He's talking about dwarf supremacy in the chat. So come on, DM Wisdom. Are you an elf supremacist or what? Or do we have to send the Knight of the Long Ears approaches? That's a really bad history joke.
I think I have to go upon what my players do. I don't think anybody in the last 5 years has played an elf.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Not even a half elf. Yeah. Jotuns or like we call them Jotuns in our game, but they're giants, right? Some of those, we have some furries in the game, but nobody ever plays a halfling. Nobody ever plays an elf. I like them. I think they're mysterious. They're always great as an archer. They add flavor, but I think they've been overused. And so Yeah. I don't know. Nobody in my group really
That
plays
kind of-
them, and I always play a human, so don't ask me.
I think the problem with elves is Orlando Bloom. I think Orlando Bloom, when he played Legolas, he kind of, that was it. That was, everyone saw that was elves forevermore.
Right.
And now people struggle to think of an elvish wizard, or they struggle to think of an elf that isn't Legolas.
Mhm.
True.
Yeah.
Those movies, as much as I like those films, I think did a lot of damage to fantasy, in which, you know, fantasy was all of a sudden just Lord of the Rings and nothing but. And I was guilty of that for a very long time. It's just those films were just fantasy to me. That was the genre. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's a lot better for people to have a better idea of what elves are capable of. There is an elf wizard whose name I forget in the Orc King by R.A. Salvatore, and he is part of the battle against the Half Ogre Clan Garuk, and he's conjuring like this little fire dragon to sort of play with another fire dragon, and people are taking bets on it. And then he tells Catty Bree that, yeah, when he was an apprentice, he'd been holding a wand like that, sort of like chewing a pen, but it was a wand of magic missile, and he accidentally set it off whilst it was against his face. And he showed her this scar that he'd had from this learning his lessons as an apprentice. And, you know, you get this little look into elves that can make mistakes that aren't world-shattering, but are just very human-esque, but still, he's an elf. I don't know, how do you make an elf more human without ruining him being an elf? You know? Because not all elves are going to be the pinnacle of elfdom. They're not all Legolas. Some of them are, you know, Snarfle, and they make toys or something. I don't know. Oh yeah, everyone go quiet.
I mean, it depends on what you're basing it on. You know, you go back to mythological depiction of elves versus the Victorian era depiction of elves. You know, like the Santa Claus with his elves, that is based on the Victorian picture of elves.
I have to
where they're
apologize
basically
for my
like
ancestors
pixies.
in that sense. They made a lot of very strange fiction.
Well, it's like pixies and things like that, kind of along those lines, versus the more ominous elf. You know, if you go back into mythology, you had the light elves and the dark elves. You know, the good elves and the bad elves. The above ground and the below ground elves. But, you know, if you really dive into it, in some corners of Germanic culture, the word goblin can be intertwined with elf, that they're all basically connected. Same with dwarves, same with trolls.
In Proto-Germanic English, orc has roots with demon.
Yeah. And so it's very much down to a personal interpretation, but whichever one of these baselines you take, they're not human and they're very alien to human. And I think that's something that very few people are able to depict at the table, especially if it's not about, like, I don't ask my players to play act. You know, we're not doing dinner theater, we're playing a game. But at the same time, it's an understanding that elves are truly alien to humanity. And that's why, actually, as much as I love the Forgotten Realms, even though my Forgotten Realms are still gray box first edition Forgotten Realms, which is the best Forgotten Realms, what the Forgotten Realms has turned into is that basically every mid-sized town is a cultural melting pot.
This
where you
is
find every race
this,
and culture
you
and everything
are
intermingling.
exactly right on this. Variax, do you want to plug yourself, my friend? And we will allow you to flee.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
No worries, man.
A bit. So yeah, I'm Variax. I'm on YouTube as Variax and Twitch as Big V Streams. I'm a variety streamer, usually playing roleplay games and usually playing roles in those role-playing games. So yeah, if you want to check me out, that'd be very, very kind.
There's his
thank
link.
you for having me.
No, mate, you're always welcome. I hope you feel a bit better sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Enjoy.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
But so on the point of cultural melting pots, and this is an incredibly important point. If a cultural melting pot has taken place, there needs to be specific instances, and also the tributaries into that river of the cultural melting pot need to be very geographically close together, and also have pressures as to what drove them into a smaller space to then melt. I think that's what a lot of game masters and world builders miss, is they all think, oh, it's just California is ubiquitous. It's really not. For millennia, Dean can attest to this. The English, Scots, Welsh, and Irish, we interbreed with one another. English DNA is 40% Celtic, and yet we are still very much a distinct cultural people. So even though we live on this little island together, and we can sort of like blur at the borders, we're not a melting pot as such. We're very similar to one another after 2,000 years, but we are still very much separate peoples. And I think that needs to be taken into account more often. Even if you were to go through to Germany and look at the separate states of Germany, you've got different types of Germans, because forever they weren't Germans. They were Thuringians, they were Austrians, they were Bavarians, they were, and so on and so forth. So you are exactly right that this cultural melting pot aesthetic shouldn't really exist. One of the things I write about a lot, again, to bring up my own work for a little bit of stroking my own ego, is the reason that you have highborn elves and wood elves popping up pretty much everywhere is because, one, there are trees everywhere, and the highborn, it's their job to just spread out amongst everyone and begin the dissemination of wisdom. So you'll find like a highborn in pretty much every town who might not be from there. He might have been there for like 2 seconds of that town's life, but he's still there doing his thing. You don't just have, oh, that's Bill, he's got the pointy ears, and then there's his dwarven mate there. It just doesn't happen. Sorry, I've gone off on a massive tangent here, but I think what you said there was very important. Cultural melting pots need to be very specific.
Yeah, I think Realm Builder guy came up with talking about like the origins of elves, Germanic, Scandinavian, all of this, that there's been a train of thought, especially with my community, about getting away from playing elves, halflings, and dwarves, and just playing humans, because it reintroduces the mystery of it all. And where if you're playing an elf, if you're playing a dragonborn, you're basically just putting on a skin suit and you're just playing a human. So there's nothing special about you because of that melting pot. You now become just like everybody else. You're trying to fit into whatever culture, city, setting that you are in. And if you limit it, then all of a sudden, when you come across an elf or any of these other creatures, they're now mysterious. They're now interesting. They are alien, and you don't know necessarily their cultural do's and don'ts. And it is an interesting thing to think about, because no matter what we play, no matter what race we're playing in a fantasy RPG, you are just being human and just putting a quirk on it, and that's it. And so the mystery is lost.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find it difficult when a player plays an elf, and I mention an event that happened a couple 100 years ago, and the player's like, oh, have I got a history check on this? And I'm like, well, you were alive then.
Yeah, you lived this.
you existed. You come from that area of the world. You know that event. You were young, but you experienced it. and it's that alienness that a human playing an elf, long lived, they can't bring that to the table.
My usual remedy to this is when someone wants to play an elf, I will tell them to play a young elf. Yeah, be 50 or 60. Don't be hundreds of years old. Before we answer my wife's question there was something I wanted to say. Alien. We keep using the word alien. I don't think it's quite the right word. I've just come out of a bit of a sci-fi kick where, I was talking about aliens a lot. When you think about sci-fi aliens, those are truly like otherworldly, like these. I'm using the word "like" in the wrong context. Damn it! Someone punish me later. The elves, if they are inhabiting Mundus, the material plane, and they're living alongside other civilizations, there is going to have been enough cultural exchange, I think, that you can have a fair idea of how an elf will act toward a dwarf and so on and so forth. I think Gygax knew that as well. That's why he had the table of racial relations at the beginning of the player's handbook. Yeah, I would say so. I think alien is. I see where you're going with it, but I don't think they're entirely alien unless they have just this second wandered out of the Feywild. Would that be a fair point to put on that before we go to the question? Anyone disagree with me?
But possibly. Where do the Eladrin fit?
Well, the Eladrin are awesome. I love the Eladrin, but they would be the sort of fairy tale going into the Seelie or Unseelie court, best not tell them your name kind of thing. But if you've just got an elven village in a wood, you might know, oh, they're druidic. If you enter their forest, you're likely going to get filled with arrows. You best ask permission outside the forest before you go in. That sort of thing. So you'd have if you were a young village boy on the edge of the elf forest, you would know, at least from secondhand information, there are elves in the woods. If you encounter them, do this. But hey, even elves on the material plane, if they encounter an Eladrin, they know that it's probably best not to interact.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to?
So that has to do with making your elves less alien. And so they're integrated. I don't know if you...
I wouldn't say integrated. It's like there's a difference between an alien and a foreigner.
Well, the thing is that the elves, from a cosmological fantasy sort of setting, should be coming from the Fae, from fairy.
Or descended of, at the very least.
Yeah, at the very least. So if they're descended from it, that then at best they're half elves. So really it's about defining your terms. What does it mean? So if the elves actually are from the prime material, then by all means, there's going to be that relation. But I don't know. I kind of don't dig it. I look to Scandinavian, Germanic, and Celtic lore when I'm informing those creatures in my world. And so therefore they are alien. They are from outside of the prime material. And so really you have to define your terms per game. If you're just having say again?
Per setting, sort of. So if you were if you were using the sort of the from the Fae directly sort of thing, then I would agree with you. But most fantasy worlds that people go through are more grounded than that. And the elves and the Eladrin, which would be the sort of elf that you're describing in terms of at least the modern era of the game. So we have those sorts of separations. But I think what I'm saying is elves are alien in their mannerisms. So if a human was to meet an elf, yes, the elf would sort of seem timeless and ageless. Like I think of Sturm's meeting with the black-haired elf that gives him the stone. I can't remember her name, but how different that she is to him, and she thinks that he is very different to her, and there's that sort of exchange, but they still speak the same language. No, they can still speak with one another. He tells her name, and she doesn't steal the name. So there's there's a limit to how much Fey you can put in there without the game breaking down if you've got an elf in the party.
So Iron Empire said, make elves Fey again. And I couldn't agree more.
Well, speaking of then, which elves are your favourite? We'll start with Dean because he's in the top left. Favourite kind of elf. Doesn't have to be D&D, can be literature, can be your own.
Well, it comes down to a question of whether... so your opinion on the sci-fi version of elves, do they count as elves? So I'm thinking here of the Vulcans,
The
pointy ears, long-lived, very intelligent.
The Eldar,
Yeah.
40k, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the Minbari from Babylon 5. Very based on the kind of elvish traditions of
Yeah,
fantasy.
I mean, I've been posting about space elves a lot, so yeah, I'll take a sci-fi elf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if we're going to include them, I think the Minbari are one of my favorite fictional elves. Because of the way they kept themselves very much to themselves. They were mysterious. Their partnership with the Vorlon, who incredible writing for the first few seasons, where you didn't know what was going on and who the powers were. And as much as I love fantasy elves, I think the Minbari for me left quite an impression on what an elf should come across. It's that alienness that you've been talking about. You know, they existed in the galaxy, but they kept themselves to themselves, and their mannerisms were very different. You could offend them without even knowing it, and then they would kill you because they were honor bound to do such. And I found that fascinating.
So I'm not too familiar with Babylon 5. I'll have to put it on my list of things that I intend to watch but never get around to. Realm Builder.
I mean, if we would limit it to D&D, I'm very partial to wood elves.
Traditional.
Very traditional. I find them the most elfy of elves.
Get out of our woods!
Kind of your Lothlorien type Mirkwood elves, especially Mirkwood elves, because they just have that edge, that bit of danger to them, that everyone is kind of a little bit afraid of them, and that's the type of elf that I prefer. If I expand beyond that, the depiction in Paul Anderson's novels of elves, be it in Broken Sword or 3 Hearts, 3 Lions, where they're part of the world where humans are, but they are distinctly separate. There are realms where they are. You can't just walk next door and walk to the elves.
Sort of
partially, you either have to be invited to this or kidnapped to it. You know, one of the main storylines in the Broken Sword is where they basically swap out a human and an elf at birth because they were fascinated and wanted to have a human in the elven court. And
it didn't last very long.
Yeah, and it's that type of elvish depiction I find more interesting in a fantasy side than just it's Bob the elf who lives next door. That's boring to me.
Agreed.
Elves with an edge, I think, it's more fun. It's kind of like dwarves with an edge in the same way. Like, got to be careful because they got quite the temper.
DM wisdom.
If I were to play one, definitely a wood elf. But my favorite is the drow. I really enjoy the drow. You come with a baked-in backstory, and it goes deep. It goes very deep, and then you have moral quandaries with the drow in regards with slavery and whatnot, and so you have instant role play aspects, which I really enjoy. And especially if you have, like the Driz sort of character where he's trying to do the right thing, trying to,
overcome.
Overcome. I love the anti-hero. Hellboy's my favorite, superhero. And so that anti-hero thing, it really speaks to me that you're able to overcome your own flaws. It's a picture of who we are. to overcome such things, so that you can be the best that you can be. So I would say Drow are just stupidly wonderful, and just
It's
have a
gold
lot of
mine.
meat. They have a lot of meat to them. So
Sadly, it's a gold mine that is being abused, but
Yeah.
gold mine nonetheless.
yeah, true.
I reckon I agree. I think that if they're not my favorite, they are probably my second favorite. Be the Drow. I love Drizzt. I really, really love Drizzt. Although I do find that sadly Salvatore has been sort of captured by the spirit of the age, let's say, and has kind of reneged on quite a lot of what made his books special to begin with, which is a shame. But the fight scenes are still there. He still mechanically is an incredibly good writer. I think if we're going to be talking the best kind of elves, like the tippitiest, toppitest, most preem cut of elf, I think we have to talk about the Noldor. Because the Noldor are the elves. Like, yeah, you've got your Sylvan elves, who is sort of your wood elves, but the Noldor, the kingly high elves. I know that Feifel and a couple of adventurers was talking about it in the chat. These elves that have seen some shit and are now just sort of these Vietnam veterans of the world, who are now trying their best, who actually, for centuries, for maybe thousands of years, took on a shepherding role and tried their best to make kingdoms, to bring art and technology to mankind, or in some ways committed crimes against them. I believe the Noldor hunted the pygmy dwarves when they first found them, not realizing that they were dwarves. So I think that the idea of this ancient lived people that have lived so long as to lose all hope, only to have it rekindled in the most silliest of times, and then to start trying again to help particular members of lesser lived peoples, only for the cycle to then repeat, for them people to die, for their ancestors to forget those people, and then to find someone else. It's really an interesting thing. It's like a race of Merlin to a race of King Arthur. You've got these old, wise, magically powerful beings, and then you've got the energetic young king. And so the elf is always the advisor and never really the engine of the story, though, is how I find them. Unless you're Feanor, in which case you're a prat. I think high elves would have to be there. Marinus is back, so we'll bring him back in. Your favorite elf, sir?
That would be the gray elves. High elves. That's just high elves in AD&D, and I said it in chat, but I wanted to actually say it out loud too, because they're smarter and naturally better than everybody else. So who wouldn't?
Can we have a special shout out to the high elves from Warhammer Fantasy? The demon killing high elves. We live in paradise. We don't need to learn how to fight. Oh shit, what's that? Quick, let me pull out this cursed sword. Oh man, I think the high elves from fantasy are a very strong contender for elfiest elf, because I think they were supposed to be the elfiest elves that ever elved. We had some more questions somewhere. We actually had a rumble.
Wait, can I update my answer?
Updates? Yeah, go on then. 2.0.
I'm gonna say the Gelfling from the Dark Crystal.
It's been years since I watched that film.
Would you consider them elves? Because I would. I mean, obviously that's where the name came from. Gelf, elf, Gelf.
Well, would you consider a Kender an elf? Because,
Yes.
You see, here's where we're going to run into it again. Like, Kender aren't particularly aliens so much as they're just kleptomaniacs naturally.
But like, wait. Aren't Kenders more like
Halflings.
Hobbit? Yeah, they're more on the halfling side.
Which are also elves. So
Fable.
it's
yeah,
you know
you can go
you've
there.
got like the little people elves, which I think are like more an Irish thing, I think. And then you got the Icelandic elves, which are more of a high elf thing, and yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of elf. Like under the hood, if you look under the hood, you just find elves all the way down.
Are we going to consider gnomes elves
Little
too,
people,
since
yeah.
they're like dwarves that decided to
I mean,
function
if
more
you
like
the
with their
dwarves
faith?
themselves are probably
natures.
the only things that aren't actually elves, because they're
That's because they
well,
say
no,
they're
it's because
not.
they're
Yeah,
a
but
distinct
they are.
thing from the mythology that both arise from. Feifel had a really good point in chat where she said, "Are elves the angels of paganism, whereas Christianity's elves are angels?" I think that was
No.
a bit of a
No,
weird
that-
way of looking at it.
As a pagan and someone that follows that path, they're not. They're actually your ancestors.
You see, now that just gets more confusing because that were elves.
Exactly.
Chaos.
They're just
Well,
on
I mean-
a different level.
If you go to late medieval, early modern period, so say 14th to 16th century, early 17th century,
Renaissance.
belief on elves is that they, like all fae, are actually the reincarnated spirits of people who died, and usually bad people, because they didn't pass on to heaven. Instead, they have come back as cursed fae.
Right.
And that's kind of when fae changed from that Germanic viewpoint of you've got some good, you got some bad, and that one they're like, oh no, they're cursed.
They're
evil
all unseelie,
spirits.
damn it. Don't touch a single one.
Well,
but if you take out Christendom from the equation, they're now not bad. That's the thing. When you start going back to 13th, 14th, 15th century, basically you have a Christian viewpoint, and what they were trying to do is completely squash the idea of elves. And so, yeah, of course they're going to be bad. They're going to be evil. And in some respects, that's why we got, Jack was saying earlier, where, like elves and goblins and all of these were kind of the same. And they were the same. But it was Christendom that came in and twisted it so that they could push their own agenda with that. So you always have to look through the lens of who's telling the story. Even oh God, I can't even think of his name. Snorlsberg, right? The dude that was that his name? I can't even think right
now. I don't know,
but
Snarlsberg is an incredible name.
Yeah, it's the dude that basically wrote the Poetica Edda.
Snorri.
Snorri, yeah, Sturluson. There you go, Snorri Sturluson, and he, from a Christian viewpoint, wrote down everything that was supposed to be orally, passed down, and there's twistings there. Like we get the idea of the Allfather. Well, he was saying, well, these people were smart enough to know that there was a supreme being, so we're going to turn Odin into the Allfather. So therefore, he is like God, and Thor is like Jesus himself, and or
so he then commits the sin of utilitarianism, and also the heresy of utilitarianism and modalism, whilst he's trying to destroy somebody else's faith. Congratulations, you played yourself.
Yeah, welcome.
I think that this is pretty much a really, really good topic for a future show, Jack, because there's a lot of stuff that you can go to with this. I mean, taking the elves and turning them to evil spirits, that's really just taking the whole Nephilim thing and taking the three flavors of demon and just tacking that on. So it's
I used to run a theology
Christian.
I used to run a theology show. I was at one point. I had a small, semi-successful theology channel, and I sort of detailed my my conversion from the Church of England to Catholicism on it. So I it's not like I'm ill-read on this, but it's also, and I find it incredibly interesting. But the problem that we would run into, I find, is it's very difficult to have that kind of discussion. It's all right talking about mythology. It's all right talking about that sort of thing. And for DM wisdom, it'll stray into the realm of faith a little bit. But when we start talking in terms of the way different faiths have interacted over time and over history, we then start treading way too close to the rapids of the culture war that I really don't want to get into. So that would have to be a very carefully picked panel that was very, very well aware of the good faith that discussion was taking place in.
So I wouldn't be invited, is what you're saying?
No, of course.
Neither would I. It's okay. He wouldn't want either us there.
It would be one of those things where it would have to, and I believe you have this ability, DM Wisdom, and people would have to sort of they'd have to step out of their own shoes, not go into someone else's, but like not be in their own. Am I making sense there?
Yeah.
So it would be interesting waters, but then again, most interesting waters are incredibly dangerous.
Let me just say, and hopefully not too many people I know are on this chat or whatever, but I used to be a non-denominational pastor for years.
I think you'd mentioned that on a different show as well.
Yeah.
Which is
And so
interesting.
I've got different perspectives on all of that, but I understand, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. I took my debate classes, and they would say you're going to talk on abortion and for it, and then halfway through they said, okay, now you need to
swap sides,
argue against it,
Yeah.
And so there, I understand that there's different viewpoints and
Oh no, it's less that I'm worried about you specifically. It's more the audience will froth at the mouth against each other in the chat. It's not quite where this show is, but you are right that it could be interesting at some point, Marinus. Although, is it where I want to take the brand? Maybe. You've been quiet up there for a bit, Dean. How's it going?
Not bad. I'm just listening to all the theological discussions, paganism, and I got to be honest, I'm a very proud agnostic.
Fair.
Brought up in the Christian faith, so I guess that's the closest I have. But I'm honest, I don't know what's out there. I don't know if there's some great entity. All I want to do is do some role playing.
Oof, Feifel. I'm not gonna. That's some hard hitting. That's a hard hitting comment that I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see. Oh Jesus. Realm Builder guy, save me. Say something about elves.
Elves. So speaking of pagan evil spirits,
Oh damn it.
no, I mean, bringing it back to elves, what this does show is that there are different lenses and different types and interpretation of elves that you can bring forward. And I think everyone can agree that the current version of it that is in the mainstream of tabletop role-playing has lost its magic, ironically. And so it'd be nice to recapture that. And I think there are a lot of games out there that actually do an incredibly good job of that, be it not at all traditional, like RuneQuest, where elves are definitely a completely alien species because they look like trees, to other games that I think treat them in a really unique way. If you look at games from Free League is a great example. The elves in Symbaroum or the elves in Forbidden Lands are very uniquely flavored in the way they interact with the environment and the lore. I mean, spoilers here, but Forbidden Land elves have a crystal inside of them, and when they choose they want to die, they smash the crystal, and from that new elves are born.
That's
and
really unique.
and the crystals basically came from outer space.
It's
Ish.
kind of like mushrooms. They're mushrooms. They're space mushrooms.
Yeah, they're like 40k orcs, just better looking. And then in Symbaroum, they are the dark, though pale skinned, but kind of dark, brooding guardians of the forest of Davokar to try to keep people out from awakening the ancient demonic evil that is lurking in the woods.
You're not
And they
allowed
will
in for
just-
your own good.
Yeah, and they'll just basically murder any human that ventures in there that they don't like, because don't mess with the stuff you don't know, because that is what humans do. You always have to poke and prod. And those are some of my favorite modern
That's like the
role-playing game
anti-hero
depictions.
version of the shepherd. Like
Yeah.
we're shepherding you by not allowing you into it. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I
they're
like that a lot.
protecting the world from itself.
I'm going to steal that. Right, next question, and we'll make this the last one because we're approaching on an hour and a half, which is a nice little time for me to wrap up and then go straight back to Oblivion. Question from Feifel herself. Are vampires an allegory for elves in a modern setting? Dean.
Well, it brings to mind Shadowrun, where you have both elves and vampires within a modern setting. In fact, it's surprising how much of the beginning of Shadowrun, when you read the how the game sets up, it's sort of like dragons appear around 2011, I think it was, which at that time, wow, way in the future. Can you imagine such a year? And now you look at how that game, you had your elves born from humans, altered through magic. But you also had your vampires.
Born from humans, altered through magic.
So if I put those side by side, I wouldn't say they would exist in a modern setting. But then if you take something like Vampire the Masquerade, could you say that the vampires are elf-like? Quite possibly.
You've got
Long-lived.
that immortal aspect to it, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Alien? Not so
You're then
much.
drawing upon,
Unless you talk about the Nosferatu.
Yeah, in which case maybe there are some analogies you could draw. The ways of saying it. Yeah, maybe vampires are a bit elf-like, or maybe elves are drawing from vampire myth. In my view, I would say that they're two separate entities. And it opens up. We discussed earlier, elves can't be resurrected in AD&D. They don't have souls. So could an elf vampire exist?
I was always under the impression elf undead couldn't exist outside of banshees because they were very particular.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I think the Brass Dragon in one of his campaigns, an elf NPC we knew died, and he was attacked by a necromancer's party, and he wasn't raised. A sort of a nod to that. Interesting thoughts, though, Mr. Realm Builder guy.
For me, that would be a long leap. That vampires are an allegory for elves, because to me, vampires are demonic.
To be fair, and as Feifel has said in the chat, they do wear the same frilly shirts.
Depending on your elf, yes. But whereas, like I said, I see elves as a separate from humans. Vampires
are humans.
Are basically demonic humans, or humans that have ventured into the realm of demons in some way to get this type of pact. I mean, it's and that would be actually a very interesting show as well, the fantasy depiction of vampires.
Maybe a Halloween show this year. We'll do vampires.
Yeah. Classic Ravenloft, not the new Ravenloft.
Not the sexual icon strat. Have you guys seen that?
The new Ravenloft stuff it's truly scary. So no, I would say, I mean, if you squint, maybe vampires can be an allegory for elves in a modern setting, but I'd have to squint.
Yeah,
a lot.
That's a good way of putting it. DM Wisdom, bless us with thine wisdom.
All right, not to be the contrarian here, but yeah, absolutely. I see vampires as an allegory for elves in a modern setting as well as in fantasy. I would say any undead is akin to ancestral people, and so they're just a kindred of yourself. So like like when we look at the Draugr, and how they are ancestral people that had lived prior, might have some sort of task that they need to deal with. In that sort of like fashion, being that their ancestors, any undead, I would consider the possibility of being some sort of ancestral person within your line, and therefore vampires track with that for me. Elves, vampires, it's pretty much can be, it's not a big leap for me to go, yeah, that is exactly what they are, especially in a modern setting. You could say that these are just your dead ancestors that are living and continue to live, and they are still speaking today. And yeah.
It's funny we should go down that route, because my it was many years ago now for me, I went into a village in Lincolnshire, and I stood by the grave of one William Censored, last name, and he is my great so many greats removed grandfather, and we'd tracked down his grave, and we were there not long after I'd visited a monastery, actually. We were there, and it was a few days after, I think, his 212th birthday, if memory serves. And we found out that he had fought Napoleon, that he'd been at several battles across the globe, musket in hand. He died of old age after marrying a French lady he brought back from the war, quite literal war booty. And when they did a bit of an autopsy on him after his old age death, they found 3 musket balls still in his body. And just this weekend gone, my father took my 2 younger brothers to that grave to visit. They then went to a different village and found more of our family members from even further back, still had headstones in those churchyards. So just an interesting thing to bring up ancestry, as that happened to sort of my brothers and father over this weekend gone by. And that I'm going to have to read more in. If you've got anything that you can ping over to me to read on such things, I'd be very interested in having a skim through Wisdom. So, vampires as elves, perhaps. I quite like the World of Darkness whole descended from Cain kind of thing. I think that's kind of a cool way of doing vampires. So, Savo, the busty elves, and I have posted some petite elves. I've got that red-haired, amber-eyed elf that I post. She's quite petite, but the reason for the big titty elves is I like them, and we're going to leave the show there. Guys, thanks very much for coming in. I do appreciate it. Wisdom, it was a nice surprise to have you here again, man. It's been too long indeed. We'll have to get you back. And you know what? Maybe we will have to, maybe not on this show, but maybe we'll do the whole theology of your journey and my journey, and then talk about the way that feeds into how we construct fantasy worlds. So I've got a feeling that I take a very Tolkien approach to the way I world build, and I think that is because of the Catholicism kind of feeds into it a lot. So I'd be interested to see how these outer theologies and philosophies feed into the construction of fantastical worlds. It's incredibly interesting. It's just I find it a very delicate matter as well. Chaps, thanks for coming. Before we go, Dean, tell people who you are, where they can find you.
Okay, I'm Dean Hill Jowett. You can find me on Twitter or X at Hill_Jowett. I don't have any fancy monikers or fancy names. Just never found one that fit. And I'm creating a roleplay system called Untold Destiny. So pop along, follow me, and I'll tell you all about my elves.
Realm Builder Guy.
Yeah, you can find me on, I always have to check, I don't know my own handle. on
Realm
X,
Builder
at
RPG.
Realm Builder RPG. Yep. And then on YouTube, Realm Builder Guy. Talk a lot about role-playing games, but also on YouTube, historical strategy games, war games, things like that as well.
Brilliant. And I put both those links in there. And of course, DM Wisdom.
Hi, I'm DM Wisdom. I'm with Agranac Studios, and we play with puppets. So yeah, we've been. I haven't been able to jump in on this, but I was in between filming and editing right now. So thank you, Jack, for having me on.
No, you're always welcome, man. Like I've said before,
Yeah,
you're always welcome.
So we have a series that's coming forth right now, Dungeons and Puppets. Just a bunch of puppets playing D&D for 4 or 5 minute segments. And doing a 13 episode series in honor of Bob Ross, since he did 13 episode series. Yeah, Agranac, at Agranac Studios, wherever you think I should be, I'll be there eventually.
Ha! Of course, everyone, I am Jack at Lost Scholar over on X, and you're already here, so you should like and subscribe and share this around and follow all these wonderful gentlemen for giving me their time, and we'll figure out something to talk about next week, and maybe I'll even upload a video myself now that I've got 5 minutes. Oh, wouldn't that be a thing? A YouTuber doing YouTube for safe.